So basically the premise of the training, obviously this is a follow-on from a consulting program we did with a client, but if you've reached or if you're watching this training, basically you have a fundamental understanding of the basic knowledge and principles that it takes to prepare, launch, and optimize a profitable Facebook ads campaign. You know how the account's structured, you know all of the assets, where everything is, etc., etc. So in the second phase of basically the understanding, what you want to teach is the strategies and tools that we found after spending hundreds of thousands, which is now actually millions of dollars, euros, pounds in Facebook ads. They've helped us dramatically increase the budget of any functioning campaign while keeping them highly profitable. We just want to break down like an introduction to scaling and understanding what it actually is. As we outlined in the training, our overall blueprint with the platform is to test small, find what works, and scale. So the first two steps of this section, we want to outline that before scaling, you shouldn't forget to only scale the ad sets that are being profitable. One, if something is not working small, it probably won't work big. If you're getting it, 3x return on ad spend at $10 a day, if you double it to 20, there's no KPIs or no indicators there to suggest that will work for you. So please make sure to stick to only scaling your best performing ad sets. It's also important to be aware that your ROAS will naturally decrease the more you scale your account. If you're spending 100 grand a month, you're very, very unlikely to see a 10x return on ad spend. Obviously, if you're spending 100 euros a month, you could see a 20x and it be achievable. So it's just a natural law of the platform. So don't scale something that is too close to a break-even return on ad spend or as your kind of goal. If it's hovering around 3 and your goal is 3, you really want to give yourself a little bit of buffer space. As a guideline, let's imagine that your break-even ROAS is of 2. Then you will scale something that is a minimum of 2.5 to 3, since your ROAS will most likely decrease. Test is the second part of it. Remember that the most important principle in the entire training is the idea of constant testing. We'll show you that the strategies that have worked best for us, but that doesn't mean that every strategy will work for you or for every business. So you really have to find out what works for a business. As you said, there's no real right or wrong way to do it. There's maybe ways that are better or work better for a particular company, but ultimately there is no definitive answer as to what works and what doesn't work. It's about figuring out what works for that particular solution or that particular company at a particular time. So the idea for here should be to learn what has worked for us and then adjust to your specific situation. So first of all, what actually is scaling and what do we even mean by it? So scalability is the characteristic of a system to perform well under an increased workload. So look at your Facebook ads as a machine. You're scaling something in general is the capacity for that to work, putting more throughput through it. So a system that scales well will be able to maintain or even increase its level of performance or efficiency, even as it is tested by larger and larger operational demands. Operational demands being audience and the amount of people seeing your ads and getting through to your website. So that's really what we want to test and see, and that's what we mean by scaling. How can we develop a system that performs better and improves in efficiency as we increase the constraints that it's under? During this training, you will refer to our campaigns as systems, because any system on the planet is a mechanism in which you introduce an input and get an output on the outside. What we will teach you during the next couple of modules will be to increase your input, your main input here being budget, so you can get an even bigger output, your main output being revenue, sales, whatever that goal is. And it's a really simple mechanism where you put in your input, you have your process, you have your output, and then you feedback on this process start to finish, on this system start to finish. So your input, your process, and your output. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Cool. So there are 2 ways you can go about scaling. As we've mentioned before in the training, you don't want to change any of the settings of an ad set that is working properly, because you will reset the learning phase and it will most likely stop working, or at least take some time to get back to that stage. But one of the settings is the budget. So how are you supposed to increase the budget without changing it, without changing the actual ad set? This is the reason why you want to understand the concepts of horizontal and vertical scaling. So this graphic kind of explains it. Vertical is where you take an ad set or one best performing campaign and scale it just by increasing the budget vertically. Horizontally is where you then take the same ad set, duplicate it multiple times, and distribute that budget across a wider basically risk. So This simply means increasing the power of any given machine, which is the vertical way, which in terms of advertising means increasing the budget of your current campaign. Horizontal scaling then means increasing the budget by increasing the amount of machines, which translates to increasing the budget by creating new ad sets or campaigns. So taking what's working and duplicating it over and over again. So this might be an ad set that you're running at $100 a day and you switch it to $400 or $500. This might be one that you're running at $100 a day, but now you've got 5 of them running at $100 a day. So they spend the same, but it's just different ways of increasing the spend. So as a rule of thumb, we will start with increasing the budget vertically first, as we want to take a grasp of how our ad set will behave at a new level of budget. As we said previously, the budget is an important setting. There's a way to increase the budget without breaking its momentum. The way to do it is by increasing the budget of our ad set by a maximum of 10 to 15% every day. As if we increase the budget further, then this would be breaking its learning curve and would therefore stop working. So for example, if our ad set has a current budget of $10 a day, then we shouldn't want to increase the budget of the specific ad set from more than $1 to $1.5 per day. So as you can probably notice, and the next logical question is, well, that's going to take me fucking forever to actually get to where I need to get to. As you can probably notice, increasing the budget by 10% every day could be a really slow process if your plan is to make a dramatic change in revenue relatively fast. That's why our standard procedure is to use horizontal scaling. In module 3, we'll show you our favorite horizontal scaling strategies. So that's kind of module 1. It just covers the understanding of scaling, the understanding of a system that you're putting various inputs. You're saying to Facebook, I want to input this data, I want to input this information. Then I want you to complete the process, and based on the output, I'm going to accumulate my feedback and feed that back into my next educated approach. So it's really just taking what's working, testing, and feeding that back. It's just one giant feedback loop at more and more input. So when should you scale? Now that we've covered what is scaling and what is it, when should you scale? We understand that when you want to spend more money on ads because you want to start getting more revenue. But the problem is that not every campaign or account qualifies for scaling at every specific step. In systems theory, there's a saying that at scale, everything breaks, which means that every little flaw or problem inside of a system will be amplified when you scale it. We obviously don't want to amplify our problems, so here are the basic requirements that we look at before deciding to scale a campaign. One of those flaws could be that in an ad set of, let's say, 5 individual ads, that it's actually only one of those ads that's giving you the results. So as you increase the constraints, increase the throughput, basically what you'll find is that ad performs, the performance of it decreases as you show it to more people. And really that was the one that was getting all the sales. So naturally overall, you're going to see a decrease. So a couple of things that we look for before deciding to scale is consistency and conversion rate over time. So is your store converting visitors into customers? It's important to look at the conversion rate of your store to understand if it will be capable of handling a bigger amount of traffic. If you look at a store that has 0.4% conversion rate, ultimately by us fueling it with more traffic, it's not necessarily going to equate to more profitability because the conversion rate is so low. So if your conversion rate is below 1% in the last 60 days, then most probably you're having a hard time scaling the budget and will have a hard time. This is a very general rule, of course, that the average conversion rate could change depending on your niche and ticket. For example, a store that sells $2,000 ergonomic chairs will have an average conversion rate, maybe 0.7, 0.8%, because people don't usually buy these products on the spot, as opposed to a low ticket clothing brand, which you get 2, 3, 6, 7%. So just make sure to observe your conversion rate number, what it is on your store throughout the different seasons of the year. If you know you're going to scale a campaign in November, and you know that by scaling it by, $5,000 a month, you're going to get X amount of traffic through based on the conversion rate, that traffic should convert into X amount of sales, and you can kind of get a read of where you should be at. So also it's important to understand the seasons of e-commerce. Sometimes as business owners, we want to think that everything is linear and that we should always be growing. But in reality, you will find that throughout the year, your store will have ups and downs. For example, summer tends to be the slowest season of the year, of course, depending on the niche. So unless you're willing to make summer sales, most likely increasing the budget dramatically won't be a good idea, since people just aren't in that frame of mind for a jacket or frame of mind for, a Christmas tree in the summer, whereas swimwear is going to have the inverse effect. You're not going to be pushing swimwear in December unless you're targeting a country where it's warm. So on the other hand, autumn and winter are really good for business, and during this time it gets easier to scale almost any store, bar the exceptions of summer-based products. So the SOP for improving conversion rate, I can send that over to you after if you want, just remind me. So that's the first one when it comes to what you're looking at before you scale, which is conversion rate, consistent conversion rate. Second is a large proven audience. So a common issue that most advertisers make when trying to increase their budget and scale their account is they don't have the bandwidth within the audience. The audience is 100,000 people, when if they double their budget, they're going to fatigue that audience completely within 2 weeks. So having the bandwidth within your audience so that it can take more spend. So the problems with audiences at a larger scale of budget is that if we try to aggressively increase the budget in an audience that is too small, we run the risk of easily fatiguing this audience, pretty much reaching everybody inside it. What we want to do is focus on scaling completely cold audiences that are big enough and have been proven to work consistently. So people who've never heard of the brand, removing remarketing audiences, removing all of that kind of thing, so that we can really go after them. Finding this type of audience requires a process of continuous testing at a low budget, but it's completely worth it once we scale them. Once you see an audience of 1, 2, 5, 10 million people that you start to get traction in, it's really, really exciting because you know that you can just expand, and you're never going to really exhaust that audience, at least for a couple of weeks or months. So finding this audience, as we said, requires that process of continuous testing. Further in this training, we'll show you an advanced way to understand how audiences work and a new tool to find audiences again and again. So that's the second part. Third part is having an offer they can't refuse. So having identified an offer, product, or set of products that perform the best in your store, knowing that information will be a key element to scaling your advertising campaign, because it was way easier to scale a product in high demand. We just had a clothing client who our bestseller was out for 2 months, and we tried to push everything. We tried to create new content. And when she relaunched that product and we got it back in ads, due to the seasonality, due to just the design of the product, sales increased by 180% within the week of it coming back in. So you can't sell every product just because you want to sell it. There has to be a demand. So an offer could be a product or a service, but we need to have an offer that they can't refuse. So this has a close relationship with the conversion rate point we made previously, as a good offer tends to get a higher conversion rate. But it is also important to not forget about your average order value. Multiple times we've had clients whose average order value is too low for us to reach a profitable point. So before deciding to scale their account, our priority was to increase the average order value. Most of the time, by adding upsells, cross-sells section on their website, creating bundles of best performing products tends to do the job. Just by looking to improve your conversion rate and average order value on your website, that will allow you to increase your return on ad spend by itself, and therefore qualify for scaling. So now you should start to see how everything starts affecting each other. So the average order value, if you have a ROAS of 2 and you're getting €20 cost or €10 cost per purchase for a €20 sale, you're basically going to be at a 2x return on ad spend. If you find out that you can bundle the best selling products or have a cross sell that takes the average order value to 40, just by looking at that, and having an offer they can't refuse, you've now taken the profitability from 2 to 4 and the return on ad spend and you haven't changed anything at all. So it's quite interesting from that aspect. Does that kind of make sense how that can have an adverse effect on it?
Yeah, it does.
Cool. If you have any questions, just fire away at any stage. Time consistency. So this is on to what is the fourth part of what to look for when you scale. So we've had conversion rate, we've had large audiences, and we have had having an offer they can't refuse. So time consistency. The wrong foundations break with time. So you want to build a house on steady foundations. Ultimately, if you don't pour the right foundations, the house is going to fall over at some stage. So we want to make sure that every single one of the previous steps is on point and has stood the test of time. Not that you didn't have a flash in the pan day where you made a 6x return on ad spend and then the next day it's back to 0. You need to show consistent sales over time and proof of concept. So to predict what will happen in the future with your current setup, you can, one, look at different time frames, look at the last 7, 14, 30, 60 days. What way are things trending? What have you changed? What season of the year are you at? What was the cause of that change? What was the cause of that trend? And see if you can replicate that. If it was a downtrend, what did you change? Let's not repeat that. Number two, look at the data from previous months, years. Sorry, just to go back on point one, if you're in a generally good season for your business and things are not trending up with time, inspect all of the changes that you've made. We'll show you some tools that will help you analyze your situation further down the training. As we said, we don't want to amplify flaws, so make sure that you're trying to scale something that is trending up. You know, you can't turn something around that really your audience doesn't resonate with, and that they're really not enjoying. So the second point is look at your data from previous months, years. The business had a great month last year. Go back and make an analysis of what went well and what went bad and replicate. So if you know that November is historically a good month, like it is for most businesses, what date did it pick up? When did I run the sale last year? How long did I run the sale for? And you can really start to kind of make informed decisions based on what you should do this year, or based on your hypothesis that you create on last year's results. How do we go about improving this year? So that kind of concludes the second section of what to look for when you scale. So again, consistency and conversion rate over time, large proven audiences, having an offer they can't refuse. And number four, time consistency. If you keep those four things, you're already on the track to being a good marketer. Best scaling strategies. As mentioned above, all of the strategies outlined in the module are based on horizontal scaling. But before we go ahead and show you the specific strategies, here are some things you have to keep in mind. Number one, every time is different. Horizontal scaling in Facebook ads means based on the duplication of ad sets and audiences. This method of scaling works because the odds that something that has worked properly keeps doing so are quite high. But the reality is that every time you duplicate an audience or an ad set, it will perform slightly different. So just keep in mind that even though the odds are in your favor, there's no bulletproof method. Don't get attached. You have to keep in mind that you shouldn't get too attached to any ad set or audience. So just because something worked previously, something may change. If it's algorithm, content, just the feeling of that audience. And what we have to do is follow the rules outlined in the optimization section. So basically making sure that you stay to your principles, making sure that you don't have any emotional attachment to a piece of content. That if it doesn't work, you're strong enough to say, right, that piece of content isn't performing and I'm not going to use it. So kill the unprofitable ad sets and notice if something stops performing after multiple times of duplicating. You can't make an assumption based on one group of ads to one ad set or one ad to an ad set. We need to test it to multiple ones to make sure that it definitely doesn't resonate with any of our audiences. Number three, all audiences eventually die. Every single audience you create will eventually die and stop selling. There's no way around it. It could take 3 weeks or 5 months or a year or 2 years, but after a while you will exhaust and you will find that audience doesn't have the same results as it did before. So just keep an eye on your audience's performance over time and don't get fixed on trying to scale and save an audience that has been underperforming for some time. Instead, prevent this by never stop testing new audiences. That way, when the time comes, you already have a winner audience to take its place. So just because your campaigns are trending up at one time, don't get complacent. You want to take at least 20%, 15 to 20% of the budget and have those winning audiences coming behind it so that you're really maximizing the kind of progression of it. And when one starts to decline, you already have that one that's coming after it. So that covers the kind of the things you have to bear in mind for scaling. And before you go ahead and we jump into the strategies, every time is different. Don't get attached, and all audiences eventually die. It's nothing against you. So these are the best horizontal scaling strategies that we found after spending hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars in ads. So classic duplication. This is the classic duplication strategy because classics never go out of fashion. We've mentioned this process in the basic training, but here is the strategy step by step. Number one, take your profitable ad sets with above break-even ROAS and a good cost per purchase. 2, duplicate them into the same campaign or in a new campaign called winner ad sets, which is what we were referring to a while ago. Leave the same budget and just update the date of the duplication in the name so you know when the duplication started. Number 4, observe the behavior of these new ads for at least 24 to 48 hours and turn off the ones that were unprofitable. Number 5, repeat the process every 2 days and keep duplicating winning audiences. Test, 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 keep going, and consistency. So as you can see, it's a very, very simple strategy, but it has the benefit of being easy to do, predictable, and allows you to easily double your budget with a low level of risk. If you're taking a $10 ad set and it's working well, you duplicate it, you're now spending $20. So it's quite a quick and effective way to scale. So this is the perfect strategy for a beginner or someone who doesn't want to waste too much time or mental energy on complicated strategies. As an extra tip, you can duplicate your audience multiple times. As we explained at the start of this module, every time is different, and you will find that if you duplicate an audience 2 times, the 2 new versions will perform slightly different. So make sure not to only scale, but to also find the best versions of the new copies. So if you scale something 4 times, you then have to focus on those 4 ad sets and see which one of those is giving you the best results and apply the same logic and principles to those also. So that's just the classic duplication, pretty straightforward. The 20% duplication. So this is a very similar strategy to the classic duplication, as it lets you conservatively scale your ads while keeping your profitable ad sets untouched, therefore keeping your risk low. On this campaign, we'll use scaling tiers, which are campaigns specifically created for scaling purposes. So the process of this strategy is, number 1, taking your most profitable ad sets with an above break-even ROAS and a good cost per purchase and duplicate them into a new campaign called Scaling Tier 1. In this campaign, you will increase the budget of every single ad set by 20%. So let's say you had a campaign running before with 2 ad sets. What you're going to do is duplicate the most profitable ad sets and put them into a new campaign called Scaling Tier 1, and you're going to increase the budget by 20%. So let them run for at least 48 hours and then kill the bad performing ones. Take the best performing ad sets from Scaling Tier 1 and duplicate them once again into a new campaign called Scaling Tier 2. In this campaign, you will increase the budget by 20%. Again, a 40% increase compared to the original ad set. So what you'll do is end up with 4 or 5 campaigns, and each one might be $10 a day. Then the Scaling Tier 1 might be $12, Scaling Tier 2, $16, Scaling Tier 3, $25. And the winning ad sets from each are duplicating into the next one up so that they move up to scale and spend more in each ad set. So this strategy is great because it will keep you at a low level of risk while letting you increase the budget faster and also test new levels of budget. You will find that audiences perform differently at different levels of budget, so the strategy will let you find exactly what budget each specific audience performs best. So if one performs good at 10 and then you move it to 12 or 15 and it performs good again, and you move it to 25 and it stops performing there, or it keeps performing well there and you try to move it up, but it doesn't, have that resonance, you can just drop it back down and drop it down a league essentially. So it's basically getting good results again. So that is the 20% duplication method. And that is basically the end of the intro to the advanced training. So the areas in which we wanted to cover and that we have covered are what is scaling. If we look here, introduction to scaling, only scaling the ad sets that are being profitable, and testing. They're the 2 things that you really need to understand. What is scaling? Understand what you're actually doing when you're trying to scale an account. It's a great word, but if you don't understand what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult. And during this training, you really need to understand what this process is, what you're actually trying to achieve. And you're trying to get feedback from your market to put more better inputs into your marketing campaign for the process to work better, to get a better output. We went through horizontal and vertical scaling, which is duplication versus adding budget in one vertical. So that was what is scaling. Number 2 is when should you scale, and understanding what you need to do in terms of consistency of conversion rate, large proven audiences, and having an offer that people can't refuse, along with time consistency. And then the best scaling strategy is the mindset you have to be in and what you should take into consideration yourself before you scale. Classic duplication and the 20% duplication rule. So it's a pretty extensive training, and these principles apply to numerous platforms. This is obviously specific for Facebook. So hopefully it was useful, and I'm going to pause the recording here and we can get into some questions.